But welcome the trailblazers. Names are not merely echoes, they resonate in halls where your footsteps have yet to fall. Some leave behind legacies, others construct frameworks, but you've left behind a reckoning, and reckonings, unlike accolades, travel at the speed of light. Consider this. Behavioral psychology confirms that humans are inherently drawn to spread negative narratives at triple the rate of positive ones. Now envision yourself as the individual whose triumph is perceived as a looming threat. That is you. Even now, your name is uttered with the gravity of an approaching storm, and the speakers are far from celebratory. Why? Because your achievements transcend mere victory. You've accomplished what seemed insurmountable, dismantling obsolete systems, silencing the self-proclaimed arbiters of access, rewriting ingrained protocols and shattering cycles that have persisted for generations. Instead of skirting the established boundaries, you obliterated them, leaving those accustomed to privilege to confront the fragility of their foundations. The paradox. Many of those who recoil from your influence cannot articulate their unease. They simply remember a time before, a period of unchallenged norms now irrevocably altered. You represent the forbidden button, the one they're warned never to touch, yet they are incapable of looking away. Today we unravel the mystique, why your name now commands respect, why rooms shift when you enter, and why some will never find solace while you continue to innovate and inspire. Prepare yourself. After this, you'll grasp why your very existence has become the unexpected twist they never saw coming. One, you shattered a paradigm that predated your arrival. There's a definitive reason recurring struggles plague families, communities, and even entire civilizations. These are not coincidental misfortunes. They are deeply entrenched patterns reinforced through years, decades, and sometimes centuries of repetition. These patterns endure because previous generations lacked both the conviction and the resilience to confront them directly. Some attempted to break free only to be overwhelmed by the entrenched resistance. Others opted to avoid the conflict altogether, hoping time would somehow diminish its power. It never did. It remained dormant like a slumbering leviathan, awaiting someone bold enough, or desperate enough, to awaken it and bring about its demise. That someone turned out to be you. You didn't enter this fray motivated by fearlessness. You were driven by exhaustion. Wearied by the endless cycle of suffering, by the sight of those you cherish succumbing to toxic paradigms, by the pervasive awareness that superficial progress masked a deeply rooted poisonous core. This battle chose you long before you acknowledged it, but unlike others, you didn't retreat. Breaking such a pattern isn't a singular theatrical event. It's a gradual process, a series of resolute decisions made in the face of overwhelming opposition. It's uttering no when conformity demands a yes. It's severing ties deemed sacrosanct. It's being branded ungrateful, rebellious, difficult, even delusional for daring to reject the inherited burdens passed down as family heirlooms. And the cruelest aspect, this transformation is often accomplished in silence, devoid of external validation, because those comfortable with the status quo rarely applaud the one who disrupts it. The magnitude of your accomplishment lies not just in the act itself, but in the reverberations it creates. When you finally vanquish that pattern, you not only liberate yourself, but you also alter the destinies of all those who follow. They may never fully appreciate the sacrifices you made to enable their different lives, but your adversaries certainly do. That's why your name carries such weight. Your victory transcends the personal. You closed a door they believed would remain perpetually open. Now when your name is spoken, it's not with indifference. It's laden with significance because you demonstrated that even the most ancient intractable forms of oppression can be overcome. And you were the catalyst for their end. Too, you transformed the unattainable into the expected. Many individuals are paralyzed by perceived limitations, convinced that certain ambitions are simply beyond their reach. They hear these self-limiting beliefs echoed by family, society, and their own internal voices until they accept them as immutable facts. This is how limitations endure, not because they are inherent truths, but because they are perpetually reinforced. You did not just hear those constraints. You were nurtured in an environment saturated with them. You were intimately familiar with the script expected to enact your predetermined role, and yet you vehemently refused. Your narrative distinguishes itself because your aim wasn't merely to prove a point, but to live authentically, even if it meant shattering every unspoken convention. You pursued goals labeled as unreachable, unthinkable, too ambitious for someone of your background or circumstance. Initially, you were likely dismissed as naive. Perhaps you were even ridiculed, your inevitable failure eagerly anticipated. But as you progressed, they were forced to confront an unsettling reality: you were succeeding. And when you ultimately achieved what they swore was impossible, it didn't just transform your own existence. It destabilized the mental prisons people had constructed for themselves. You elevated the impossible to a new benchmark. This is the true source of discomfort. It's one thing to achieve personal success. It's entirely another to do so in such a spectacular fashion that others are compelled to reevaluate their own self-imposed limitations. You didn't just cross a finish line. You redesigned the entire landscape. This is why your success provokes resistance in some. It's not simply envy. It's the unsettling realization that the very walls they've relied upon for stability were in fact illusory. Your victory serves as irrefutable proof that they could have striven harder, aimed higher, but they didn't, and now they cannot ignore that truth. Your adversaries don't merely fear your abilities. They fear the ripple effect you've initiated, because once others witness what is truly possible, the convenient excuse of "that's just how things are" loses its potency. And when that excuse crumbles, control structures begin to collapse. This is the silent revolution your accomplishments have ignited. You didn't merely alter your own life. You transformed the narrative for everyone watching. And those who profited from maintaining those limitations are acutely aware of it. That's why your name now resonates with disruption, why it will never be uttered without intention again. 3. You seized territory without seeking validation. Many dedicate their lives waiting for an invitation, a sign of approval, or a formal acknowledgement before venturing into new spheres. They believe advancement is contingent upon the consent of those in positions of authority. You rejected this premise. You didn't await authorization. You didn't squander precious years knocking on doors never intended to open for you. Instead, you forged your own path, and when a clear trajectory was lacking, you constructed one. This audacity alone startled many. Gatekeepers thrive on the premise that access is a privilege they alone can bestow. Their influence is predicated on the belief that they hold the keys. Yet you circumvented their barriers entirely, demonstrating that these so-called obstacles were merely illusions for those who lacked the audacity to challenge them. In that moment, you exposed their authority for what it truly was: self-appointed, fragile, and dependent on the acquiescence of others. The reaction was predictable. They attempted to discredit you. They resorted to smear campaigns. They even feigned moral outrage, implying that you violated some unwritten law by encroaching upon their designated territory. But the fundamental truth is this: no one possesses exclusive rights to opportunity. No one has the authority to declare themselves the sole gateway to progress. And yet you demonstrated that the only permission one truly requires is their own. Your independence became a contagious force. As more individuals witnessed your success without relying on external validation, they began to question why they had been waiting in line for so long. You didn't merely disrupt their control, you undermined their entire system of power. That's why your name isn't simply remembered. It's discussed with undertones of caution. The underlying fear isn't that you succeeded, but that you succeeded independently of them. You made it irrevocably clear that individuals need not adhere to their established rules to achieve victory. They can construct their own platforms, define their own metrics, and still emerge triumphant. And for those whose identities are intertwined with their roles as gatekeepers, your very existence serves as undeniable proof that they were never the sole conduit to success. This truth is irreversible. It's why the sound of your name now feels like a fissure in the foundation of their carefully constructed world. 4. You transformed their weapons into your arsenal. The most transformative thing you did was take the very strategies devised to break you and invert their purpose entirely. Every tactic, deceit, and manipulation hurled in your direction became a blueprint for your ascension. Where they intended to inflict wounds, you extracted knowledge. Where they sought to sow confusion, you cultivated clarity. Every betrayal was meticulously dissected, every attack analyzed, every attempt to diminish you became a profound lesson in the inner workings of the system and how to master it with unparalleled precision. Their objective was to witness your downfall, and in attempting to crush you, they inadvertently supplied the raw materials for your ultimate triumph. Their insults, gossip, and machinations became invaluable case studies. You didn't just endure the chaos, they inadvertently taught you the rules of their game, which you then rewrote entirely. Suddenly, the forces intended to be your undoing became the very foundation upon which you built your platform. Even their mockery served your purpose. Their derision drew attention to your name, your ideas, your actions, whether they realized it or not. People began to take notice of the individual being actively discredited, and your visibility increased exponentially. Each attempt to bury you ultimately elevated you. And the irony was not lost on either you or anyone paying close attention. by seizing what they intended to destroy you and transforming it into your competitive advantage. You rendered yourself impervious in ways they could never have foreseen. They expended their energy on attacking while you invested yours in learning, adapting, and building. Their own power became the fuel for your meteoric rise. Their animosity became the bedrock of your resilience, and their conspiracies against you became the roadmap for your victories. In the end, the very individuals who plotted your demise unknowingly handed you the precise elements you needed to dominate. They transformed their own weapons into your indispensable tools. And that is why your name now commands attention. You didn't simply survive their attacks. You transmuted them into the instruments of your relentless momentum. Every maneuver they made to inflict harm was inverted, redirected, and amplified into a force that propelled you to heights beyond their wildest imaginings. 5. You introduced veracity into realms where it was outlawed. Your contributions transcend mere truth-telling. You carried it into environments where falsehoods were the norm and silence was the expected protocol. Every institution, every sphere of influence, every social circle that normalized denial felt the undeniable weight of your presence. Individuals had grown comfortable within their illusions, assuming their self-constructed narratives would never be challenged. Then you arrived and the carefully constructed walls of deception began to crumble. Your pronouncements weren't about confrontation for personal gratification. They were about establishing clarity. You forced clarity into places that had actively banished it. Where individuals had been conditioned to disregard, dismiss, or rewrite reality, you presented it with unwavering conviction, and that unnerved people not because the truth was inherently unpleasant, but because it exposed their willingness to exist in a state of perpetual avoidance. Your unwavering commitment to honesty didn't just illuminate, it destabilized. Those who had thrived on self-deception were now compelled to confront the reality they had been diligently evading. Some attempted to resist, clinging to their comforting illusions. But the more you persisted, the more untenable their position became. You rendered their fabricated comfort unbearable, thereby reshaping the very environment. Spaces that had previously tolerated lies were now forced to contend with integrity, and it could no longer be ignored. Your contribution wasn't mere polite discourse, it was accountability. You compelled people to confront themselves, their actions, and their choices in a light they were ill-prepared for. And that's why some cannot tolerate being in your proximity. You didn't threaten them with malice, you threatened them with reality. Your presence compels alignment with truth, which renders dishonesty intolerable. By venturing into environments where truth had been exiled, you didn't just disrupt entrenched patterns. You redefined the realm of possibility. You demonstrated that denial is potent only if left unchallenged, and you challenged it relentlessly. Now those who formerly relied on falsehoods for security are forced to grapple with a clarity they cannot escape. Your impact transcends mere truth-telling. You rendered it unstoppable. 6. You exposed the fragility of their perceived omnipotence. They devoted years, sometimes decades, to cultivating an image of invincibility. Every utterance, every action, every public display was meticulously orchestrated to project unwavering control, dominance, and authority. To the external world, their power seemed unbreakable. Yet it was all a facade, a carefully constructed illusion sustained by fear, manipulation, and the assumption that their authority would never be contested. You didn't just contest it, you shattered it. It didn't require a grand confrontation or a public spectacle. A single decisive action, a refusal to adhere to their predetermined rules, initiated the unraveling of their illusion. You revealed the fundamental truth that their authority wasn't rooted in genuine strength but in perception. The control they believed was unbreakable wasn't anchored in real power. It was sustained by the belief that others would instinctively yield, comply, and remain silent. You refused to conform. The fragility of their power became apparent the instant their defenses failed to intimidate you. Every tactic designed to maintain their dominance backfired because you saw through it and acted with unwavering conviction. The empire they had built on fear wasn't a fortress. It was a house of cards, and your courage precipitated its collapse. And once the illusion shattered, the repercussions were devastating for them. Their confidence wavered. Their sense of security evaporated, and they were haunted by unease. They realized they had underestimated not only you, but the very essence of genuine power. Real strength doesn't rely on intimidation. It relies on unwavering consistency, unimpeachable integrity, and remarkable resilience. You embodied all three, and by doing so, you exposed just how shallow their foundations were. From that moment forward, your name carried significant weight because it served as a reminder that the emperor possessed no clothes. They were forced to confront the reality that dominance predicated on fear is ephemeral, and that true influence stems from substance, not spectacle. You didn't just survive their empire, you exposed its hollowness, and now everyone, including them, knows it. 7, you compelled them to compete with integrity for the first time. For years, they operated within a system that guaranteed their victories. Rules were optional, to be bent at their convenience. Truth was negotiable, a mere bargaining chip to gain an advantage. Winning wasn't about skill, it was about manipulation, deception, and seizing every possible shortcut. That was the game they had mastered, and those around them had accepted it as the status quo. Then you arrived, and nothing functioned as they expected. You didn't exploit shortcuts or compromise your principles to emulate their tactics. You approached every challenge fully prepared, acutely aware, and firmly grounded in your own integrity. Suddenly, the advantages they had grown accustomed to vanished. Every lie, every deception, every manipulation they relied on was rendered useless against you. Your presence demanded fairness, and fairness terrified them. For the first time, they were forced to compete on equal terms, and the outcome was brutally honest. Their skills alone were insufficient. What they had mistaken for power crumbled because they had never measured themselves against someone who played by the rules of honesty. You exposed a reality they could no longer ignore. Their victories were never legitimate. They were mere illusions. And when they were forced to engage in genuine competition, their shortcomings became undeniable. Your victory transcended the personal. You established a new standard for authentic success. They were ill-equipped to deal with someone who could outthink, outmaneuver, and outlast them without resorting to underhanded tactics. Every effort they made to regain control only amplified their inadequacies. Your mastery stemmed not just from your skills, but from your unwavering commitment to integrity. Your ability to maintain clarity while they desperately scrambled. By compelling them into a fair contest, you exposed the emptiness of their previous triumphs and redefined the parameters of engagement. They were now forced to confront themselves, and it caused them profound discomfort. They could no longer rely on shortcuts, and that realization unsettled them more than any defeat ever could. You didn't just secure a victory. They were compelled to acknowledge the standards you established, and that acknowledgement alone shifted the balance of power in ways they are still grappling with. 8. You achieved what they deemed impossible without sacrificing your own values. They have spent their lives convincing themselves that ruthlessness, manipulation, and the compromise of any potentially inconvenient principle are the only paths to success. To them, power demands ruthlessness, and morality is a luxury afforded only to the weak. That's why they could never comprehend you. They assumed that reaching your level would necessitate mirroring their behavior, sacrificing your integrity along the way, but you resisted that temptation. You navigated challenges, surmounted obstacles, and achieved victories without trading your soul for status. You didn't deceive, manipulate, or distort your values to conform to their standards. You succeeded through deliberate action, unwavering discipline, and fierce dedication to your true self, and that is the source of their profound disquiet. They anticipated you bending or breaking, but you defied their expectations. You demonstrated that excellence, influence, and authentic achievement do not require compromise. That's why your success is so disconcerting to them. It's not merely that you triumphed, but that you did so on terms they are incapable of replicating without confronting the moral compromises they have been diligently avoiding. Every rationalization they have ever employed. You have to be ruthless. You have to be cold. You cannot survive otherwise collapses in the face of your living example. Your victory compels them to acknowledge that their narrative about power and success was never absolute. It was simply self-serving, and they are loath to admit it. They cannot concede that you achieved what they believed was impossible without losing yourself, because that would require honest introspection about their own choices. Your triumph exposes the emptiness behind the walls they have constructed, and that's the root of their resentment. Every success you claim serves as a mirror reflecting everything they are unwilling to confront. Your win was not just a victory. They were unaware the game could be played with such integrity. By maintaining your integrity while surpassing them, you redefine the meaning of strength, influence, and genuine victory. Your path not only challenges them, it shames the shortcuts and moral compromises they have relied on for so long. You did not emulate them, and that is the most difficult truth for them to accept. 9. You ended an era of perceived untouchability. For years, certain individuals, factions, and institutions have operated as if exempt from the rules that govern everyone else. They navigated life with an implicit assumption that accountability was a concept reserved for others. Their inflated confidence, their unyielding arrogance, and the atmosphere of intimidation they cultivated were all predicated on the notion that no one could challenge them without incurring a severe penalty. This created a bubble around them, shielding them from scrutiny, criticism, and consequences. Then you arrived. You sought no permission. You engaged in no negotiations for access, and you did not tiptoe around their dominance. You entered the fray with clarity, courage, and a resolute purpose, and the untouchable were subjected to the illuminating power of truth. For the first time, their power was tested by someone who refused to be intimidated. The result was undeniable. Even those who had convinced themselves of their invulnerability realized that vulnerability is a universal human experience. Your actions didn't just reveal weaknesses, they altered the entire perception of authority. Those who had relied on fear and untouchability as shields could no longer hide behind them. Your actions triggered a chain reaction. Individuals in positions of false security began questioning their own invincibility. Systems that had previously operated unchallenged were now under intense scrutiny, and the balance of power began to shift as you demonstrated that no one is immune to consequences. This ripple effect continues to spread. Individuals who once considered themselves untouchable are now cautious, calculating, and uncertain. The fear they once inspired has been replaced by an awareness of their own fragility. You didn't just dismantle the dominance of one individual. You undermined an entire culture of assumed invulnerability. That's why your presence continues to generate waves. You brought an end to an era in which arrogance and position could shield wrongdoing. You demonstrated that accountability knows no exceptions, and that even the seemingly invincible can be held accountable to the truth. Your actions resonated far beyond those who underestimated you. They transmitted a message across systems, groups, and networks that no one's position is guaranteed and no shield is impenetrable. Your victory was not just a personal one. You fundamentally altered the landscape for everyone. You transformed their silence into your spotlight. They believed that ignoring you would effectively erase you. They assumed that by refusing to acknowledge your accomplishments, they could diminish your presence, render you invisible, and ultimately make you irrelevant. Their strategy was to weaponize silence, to employ omission as a shield. However, they failed to comprehend that silence has a peculiar way of attracting attention, particularly when someone refuses to cower within its shadows. Every time they turned their backs, the world took notice. People started questioning the lack of recognition, the subtle avoidance, and the gaps in the narrative they were attempting to control. Their silence didn't conceal you. It amplified your presence. It made your accomplishments, your work, and your influence impossible to disregard. People were naturally prompted to ask, why aren't they acknowledging this? Why is this being deliberately omitted? And in that very curiosity, your visibility soared. Ironically, their attempt to diminish you became the catalyst for your meteoric rise. Their deliberate avoidance served as a signal to anyone paying attention. Something extraordinary is happening here, something that cannot be contained by their indifference. Their omissions became markers of your profound impact. people began noticing not just what you were doing, but the fact that others felt intimidated or threatened enough to suppress it. This tension elevated your value without any need for self-promotion. So there you have it, you, the trailblazer, the paradigm shifter, the one who dared to rewrite the rules. Your journey hasn't been easy, but you've proven that breaking cycles, transforming the impossible, and seizing your own power, all while staying true to your values, creates a legacy that resonates far beyond your immediate sphere. You've shown the world that perceived untouchability is a myth, and that even silence can be transformed into a spotlight. Ultimately, you've become a beacon of what's possible when courage meets conviction. Now I'd love to hear your thoughts. What resonated with you the most? Do you have a personal experience that echoes any of these points, or maybe you have a question you'd like to ask? Jump down to the comments below and let's get the conversation going. And if this message inspired you, please hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on future explorations of how to navigate a world that's constantly evolving. Let's continue this journey of empowerment and transformation together. Together.